Next, we're going to talk about providing instruction for students who have physical and cognitive disabilities. This is an exciting time to be talking about outcomes for individuals with severe disabilities. With respect to school, there is now laws that guarantee a free, appropriate public education for all students, regardless of disability. With respect to employment, the Americans with Disabilities Act is in place to help in fighting discrimination in the workplace. With respect to community living, there is now a large number of group homes and increased support for independent living, so individuals with disabilities have more options than they have had in the past. At the same time, while we are seeing some outstanding outcomes for some individuals, there's also the recognition that we are still not where we'd like to be in terms of these different areas. With respect to academics and education, we know that individuals with severe disabilities, even if an individual just has physical disabilities and not cognitive disabilities, we know that these individuals are the least likely to pursue post-secondary education. We know that there are extremely high levels of unemployment among individuals who have physical and cognitive disabilities, sometimes as low as 2 or 3% employment levels for individuals with some severe disabilities, so fewer than 2 or 3 in 100 having jobs. And while we know more individuals with disabilities are living in the community, we also know that many of those individuals have very few friendships and very limited social circles for interaction and participation in community events. So we're in sort of a mixed situation right here where we know there are some very positive individual outcomes, but when we look at groups as a whole, clearly we are not where we would like to be. So what I'd like to talk about over the next few minutes are ways that we can put activities and procedures in place while students are still in school in order to increase the likelihood that they will have positive outcomes as adults in living and working in society. I'm going to be talking about 4 major disability areas. I'm going to be talking about individuals with cerebral palsy, individuals with Down syndrome, individuals with autism, and individuals with traumatic brain injury. I'm going to be talking about groups so that we can talk about characteristics of people that have this diagnosis. As I do that, however, I would like to make sure that, one of my big messages here is the potential that we see among these people as individuals and the variation that we see among the individuals in this group. So we talk about a diagnosis because that helps us a little bit in terms of knowing some common characteristics, but as we talk about a diagnosis, I would strongly encourage you to be very guarded about what that tells us about what an individual may achieve, because we see extremely wide variation in adult outcomes for individuals with these diagnoses. And I think that will become apparent as we talk about a number of individuals in the course of this presentation. Cerebral palsy is a term used to describe a condition where a child has sustained damage to their brain before, during, or immediately after birth. Typically, the impact of this damage to the brain is some sort of cognitive disability or some sort of physical disability. Again, as I'd mentioned earlier, I would strongly encourage you to keep in mind the wide variation that we see among individuals with a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. And just because we see an individual with severe physical disabilities doesn't necessarily mean that we are working with an individual that has severe cognitive disabilities. I'd like to briefly introduce you to Beth Ann Luciani. Beth Ann Luciani is an individual with a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. She has a severe physical disability. The only movement over which she has reliable control is movement of her head to hit a switch that is located on the headrest of her wheelchair. So she really only has one physical movement that she can reliably use. However, her cognitive abilities are, absolutely age appropriate and in fact very impressive. She is currently attending California University of Pennsylvania. Through using the switch that's mounted on the headrest of her wheelchair, she operates a computer-based communication device. In this device is an alphabet-based system that she uses to write essays and to communicate in her class. Again, GPA of 3.5 at California University, so a very strong student in a very competitive program. We'll be talking more about her when we get to our session on assistive technology. But again, just an example of somebody with severe physical disabilities where we are not seeing any cognitive disability of any kind. However, as I mentioned, there is, considerable variation among individuals with cerebral palsy. The important thing for us to keep in mind is, regardless of the level of physical disability or cognitive disability that we encounter, we need to think of creative ways to help that individual participate and contribute to society. Rebecca B&E is a young woman who has a severe physical disability and also experiences significant challenges in learning new things. Her way of contributing to society and participating in society is she volunteers in a grade 1 classroom, and her role in a sense in that classroom is to serve as a person that can be read to. And so the young children in that classroom take real delight in reading beginning reader stories to Rebecca, and Rebecca's contribution at this time, Rebecca's way of participating, is she smiles and she laughs with the children as they read these books to her. If you'd like to find out more about Rebecca and her participation in these activities, I would encourage you to go to the website that's at the bottom of your screen. But again, my big message here is, regardless of the level of disability, the challenge for us as educators is to think about how can we help these people become active and useful participants in society. As I've mentioned, sometimes what will enable people with severe physical disabilities and severe cognitive disabilities to be active participants is the use of augmentative and alternative communication. Augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, refers to the use of alternatives to speech, including sign language, picture boards, alphabet boards, or assistive technology in order to communicate with others. So there we see pictures of someone using sign language. We see some picture boards, so someone has taken pictures of concepts or vocabulary items that an individual might want to use and placed them in a menu folder so the individual can communicate by pointing to the pictures. We have also, over the past 5 or 10 years, seen lots of examples of assistive technology that can be used as an augmentative communication device. So researchers and manufacturers have taken laptop computers or some type of electronic device and programmed them so that hitting a key will produce a word being spoken, or hitting a key using the device causes a phrase to be spoken. And again, we'll speak in more detail about augmentative communication technology at a later date. I think one of my main messages in discussing individuals with cerebral palsy is to strongly encourage you not to make assumptions based on the individual's appearance. So it's really very difficult in looking at an individual with a severe physical disability to make a guess from that what their level of cognitive challenge is going to be. So the issue of communication is extremely important here. It's going to be important to establish strong communication skills with the other members of your team. So to really get a good understanding of the child's skills from the parents, from the speech-language pathologist who's working with the child, and from the occupational therapist who's working with the child. I don't think we've spoken about an occupational therapist yet, but typically it's the occupational therapist who would assist you and assist the child in finding ways for that child to participate in needed physical activities. So the occupational therapist might help you in finding ways for a child with a physical disability to make use of the computer, or they might help you find a way for the child to sit more appropriately or sit more comfortably so the child can participate, a child with physical disabilities can participate in desktop activities. Communication is also going to be extremely important with the child. So if the child does not already have an effective, efficient, and appropriate augmentative communication system, it would be important for you as a teacher to advocate with the speech-language pathologist, to advocate with the other members of the team, that a way be found for that child to communicate and be able to participate in educational activities. The next broad area of disability that I would like to talk about is Down syndrome. The cause of Down syndrome is primarily genetic, so prior to birth there is something in the genetic makeup of that individual that causes them to develop with the characteristics of a child with Down syndrome. Down syndrome typically has some cognitive impact. Down syndrome typically has some physical impact. So the child will be slower to have oral motor development, so the child will be slower to make use of speech than a child who does not have Down syndrome. The child may experience some difficulty with coordination of movement. The child may also experience some difficulty in developing stamina, so they may get tired more quickly than children who do not have Down syndrome. The exciting news about working with children with Down syndrome is that an awful lot that we thought we knew about Down syndrome in terms of what we could expect from children with Down syndrome as teenagers and adults, we have been finding out is just plain wrong. We have seen that through effective early intervention, we are seeing outcomes for children with Down syndrome that we never would have expected before. So researchers and interventionists are seeing that if children with Down syndrome are encouraged to be physically active and involved in walking from a very young age, they can actually not demonstrate any of the concerns about stamina and muscle development that I mentioned earlier. We're seeing that if children with Down syndrome are provided with ways for them to participate in activities through the use of augmentative and alternative communication, we are seeing cognitive development and language use that we never would have expected before. So a lot of what we thought we knew about Down syndrome in terms of how these children would develop and what sort of skills we would see as adults, I would have to say over the past 5 years, we've really been rewriting the book on what we should be holding as expectations for children with Down syndrome. What is extremely clear is that in the past, our expectations were way too low, and we really need to rethink ways that we can support children with Down syndrome in truly living up to their potential and demonstrating skills that we would not have expected in the past. I wanted to share with you one approach that's being investigated actually here at Penn State University with very young children with Down syndrome as young as 2 years old. And it's the use of visual scene displays as a particular type of augmentative communication system. So earlier I spoke a little bit about how we sometimes use picture boards and alphabet boards and word boards for individuals who have difficulty with speech. And what researchers at Penn State have been looking at is the use of something called a visual scene display to help very young children with Down syndrome participate in communication activities. So when we talk about a visual scene display, what we're talking about is taking a picture. So on the left there you see a picture from a book, and the book is about Old MacDonald Had a Farm. And what's happened, or what happens in creating a visual scene display, is we take that picture and we put that into a computer so that by pressing a square on the screen, the child can get the computer